to go at the same time?
I'll go first. Why should he be the next president?
And I think the country is ready for a president that will reduce the size and scope of government.
Amen.
Well, I think so often these positions that are not mainstream is determined by people other than the people. When people have their word, maybe they're more mainstream. You know, they say everybody endorses the war, but maybe mainstream America doesn't endorse it.
Do you think marijuana should be legal?
Well, I think the state should be looking at an issue like they do with alcohol. I think the federal government should be out of it. What about a tragedy? Somebody dying with cancer. Not even allowed to take a marijuana that might make them more comfortable. The states legalize it, and the federal government comes in and puts people in jail when they're dying. I mean, and then they call it compassionate conservatism. No. Drugs like this, alcohol is a deadly, deadly drug. They tried prohibition, it's a total failure. And I think the state should handle it. Children should be protected.
Can you explain what you were talking about regarding terrorism during the debates?
Well, it might take more than a soundbite for that. What I'm saying is that when it comes to terrorism, our policies contribute to it. And they like to turn that around and say, well, Ron Paul is saying that the American people deserve it and caused the problem. No. Neocon philosophy, which is that of foreign policy intervention, contributes because it causes anti-Americanism. I'm an American, you're an American. In no way did I say that you and I were the cause of it. They turn that around when they feel trapped and they don't know how to answer the philosophic position of non-intervention in the Constitution, why we go to war without declaration, so they have to turn around and say, oh, he doesn't like the troops, or he's un-American, or he said we deserved it. That's just a political ploy because they don't have a philosophic answer to the problem.
So if you were president...
Amen. Right, amen.
Terror is a tactic. Terror, there's no war on terror. That's like declaring war against criminals. McVeigh was a terrorist, so have we declared war against every terrorist in the world? No, we should go after our enemies. But we have done precisely the opposite of that. Here we go. I voted for the support of going after Osama bin Laden. He was in Afghanistan.
Amen.
Yes,
We didn't
right.
fight. We let him go. We didn't fight Tora Bora. We allowed him to go into into Pakistan. He's in Pakistan. They have a nuclear weapon, and they're our bosom buddies, and we subsidize them.
Yeah.
And then we go off and fight a war that was undeclared, and there was no Al Qaeda. That type of policy doesn't make any sense because what we have to do is protect the American people, but we have to know and understand our enemies and just not pretend that if we just go off starting new wars for other reasons. The war had been planned in Iraq many, many years before it happened. Matter of fact, the declaration of war, the essential declaration, was the Iraqi Liberation Act in 1948. That was when the Congress voted on a bill that said we will have regime change. And unfortunately, very similar resolutions have been passed already in Iran. If anything, I would like to make sure that we don't needlessly go to war against Iran.
So,
Thank you. We're ready for the truth. You're giving it to us.
Declaration of war on
Enough
Iraq
neoconning
what
over there.
spurred a lot of hatred towards the United States.
No. The antagonism that contributed to this is our foreign policy of intervention, occupation, being over there, having bombed Iraq for 10 years, having been in Iran. You know, we messed around with the Shah for 25 years, and he was a tyrant. He was our tyrant. And we had troops in Saudi Arabia. All these things contribute. The only real study of why people are willing to commit suicide terrorism was done by Robert Pape. He came up with one conclusion. It was not radical religious beliefs, it was occupation. What would we do as Americans if China occupied this country? Do you think we would fight or not? And that's the way they see it. And we have to see it through their eyes as well. And our foreign policy has drifted from the foreign policy of the founders. The founders said, don't get involved in entangling alliances. Trade and talk with people and be friendly, but don't get involved and don't go around looking for monsters to destroy. And a foreign policy should be designed for the defense of this country. Unfortunately, the policy we have now makes us more vulnerable, and that's what I think should be stopped.
Rationality, not idealism. Rationality, not idealism.
very first thing I would do to sort of soften things what's going on there, within minutes, you could at least tell our aircraft carriers to start moving away from the shorelines of Iran, yelling and screaming and intimidating them. We have surrounded Iran now. We're getting ready to go to war against them, unfortunately. We're in a country to the east and a country to the west, and we're in the ocean intimidating them. And I think just move the ships back a little.
Would you bring the troops home?
Bring the troops home? Certainly.
Bring them home!
Bring them home!
Bring our troops home!
That's called a ceasefire. And I think the sooner they know that we are going to leave whenever it's reasonable, that there'll be a ceasefire, and they may even talk to each other. They'll come up with something. Just think how much peace there's been in Vietnam since we left. Million Vietnamese, 60,000 of our men died in Vietnam. So when we leave, what do? We invest in them, and we trade, and they're more westernized than ever. The founders were absolutely right on this issue, that if you talk with people, friends with people, trade with people, we're much better off than trying to impose our will on them. This actually didn't start with this administration, nor the previous administration. This has been smoldering for about 100 years. It was Woodrow Wilson that said, we as great Americans will make the world safe for democracy. And look at what's happened since World War I.
You've got some high-profile names, people up there for the candidacy for president. What do you think about your competition right now?
Well, I haven't noticed any of them yet. It seems like they're fighting among themselves, and they all have this very conventional. I think they're dug themselves a hole, because 70% of the American people now are sick of our foreign policy. They want a new. The Democrats have nothing to offer, and all the other candidates, all the other Republican candidates say, just dig in your heels, keep doing the same thing over and over again. As a physician, I was always taught, if you make a wrong diagnosis, give the wrong treatment, just doing more of the same doesn't help the patient.
Why are you the only conservative running for the Republican Party?
Well, I guess you'll have to ask the other ones why they're not conservative.
A one-world government, and how do we stop it?
Well, I think even our first President Bush said that the New World Order was in tune, and that's what they were working for. The UN is part of that government. They're working right now very significantly for a North American Union. That's why there's a lot of people in Washington who don't care too much about our borders. They have a philosophical belief that national sovereignty is not important. It's also the reason I have made very strong suggestion that we need not be a United Nations for our national security.
What do you think about our borders and the immigration policy?
Our borders have been totally neglected. We worry more about the borders between North and South Korea and between Iraq and Syria than we do about our own.
Absolutely.
Just recently, a bunch of our border guards were picked up and sent and enticed to go over to Iraq. It's insane. I mean, we should have more border guards, and the only way you can afford it and get the personnel is bring our troops home. Worry about stuff. We don't even have the money to finance this world empire that we operate under. We have to borrow almost $3 billion a day just to pay for the war and our extravagance. And we borrow it from none other than China and Japan. I mean, we don't even have enough wealth produced in this country to finance the amount of spending that we have. And it will come to an end, and I think most Americans realize it. Middle-class Americans and poor Americans have already suffered the consequences. Their standard of living has already started down. Those who are doing well know deep down in their heart they're doing it on borrowed money. And that is going to come to an end. It's also the reason I emphasize the importance of sound money. If you allow governments, anytime throughout all of history, to print money, they always print too much and they destroy the money. Our dollar is worth 4 cents for what it was.
What do you think about the immigration policy Congress has come up with as a solution to the problem?
Well, it's 380 pages. It came out a couple of days ago. I didn't read it, but the little bit I know about it sounds like amnesty to me, and I'm not sure.